So Ayurvedic prime. So Ayurvedic prime.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, ambassadors, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We want to talk to you not about business, but about things that we think matter more, about things that hopefully arise from the heart, and that are about things that will affect the way the young people on our planet look at the future. I have been a very lucky person, as many of you know. And as I've looked at my life, I've said, what made me be sort of successful in my life? And it's about mentorship and leadership and guides along the way that were able to guide me, lead, and help me along the way and support me. Because without that support, I would not have succeeded in anything I've done. There's a time when one should do the same for the next generation. In India, one breaks one's life into 4 pieces. If one looks back 3,000 years, 2,000 years, one looks at stages of life as 4 stages of life. The first 25 years is for education. The second 25 years is devoted to one's material life, to one's careers and one's family life. The third 25 years is devoted to service and spirituality. And the last 25 years is when you start the search for enlightenment. Now, I turned 50 3 months ago. So thank you. So I decided some years ago that as I entered phase 3, I wanted to devote at least 50% of my time to our foundation work. And I said, what am I passionate about? What can I devote really 50% of my life energy to doing after the age of 50? And as I thought about that, and I looked at the world's problems, yes, we could build another hospital, yes, we could build a school, yes, we could do various other things, but I felt that the most leveraged activity that we could do was to actually support leadership. And so I said, where are these leaders? Where are the Gandhis and the Mandelas? Why aren't there enough of them on the planet? How do we find them? And as Einstein said, if an idea isn't absurd at the beginning, it has no chance of success. So we started off with an absurd premise that there are Gandhis and Mandelas and Martin Luther Kings at schools today. But the problem is that as they start to grow, the world tramples on them. Rather like small saplings, small plants, as they start to grow, they don't get an opportunity to grow to their full height of leadership because they don't have mentors, they aren't protected, they don't have the financial means, etc., etc., etc. And I said, look, let's try and do something about it. So we started with one school. Mrs. Ishwaran, who's the head of our foundation, was the principal of that school. And one cold winter morning in Delhi, when I went and proposed this idea to her, she thought I was crazy, but she said, let me humor this young man, and let's see how it works. So we tested the idea at one school. And from one school, we grew. Today, we have 70,000 children in the program. And we've done that in 6 years. And what do? We're looking for exceptional leadership talent at schools. Hitler was a great leader. Stalin was a great leader. Gandhi was a great leader. Mandela was a great leader. But what differentiated that quality of leadership? So as we thought about that, we felt that there were some fundamental things that created a difference. We look for integrity and ethics in children. So we look for children who will go to their class teacher and say, ma'am, I shouldn't be getting 9 out of 10 on this class, on this paper. I should get 6 out of 10 because you gave me too many marks. So that child has a natural ethical tendency. So we look for that. Altruism. We're looking for children that want to help others and not just themselves. Children who from a young age have a natural affinity towards caring about the world around them and the world they live in. We're looking for children that have leadership skills. We're looking for children that have a bias for action, not just talking about it, not just complaining, but getting up and doing something about it. And so we created a curriculum We worked closely with Bill Gordelli from Columbia University Teachers College. We worked with Howard Kennedy from Harvard University and others, created a curriculum, and we put that curriculum into the school system to try to identify at a young age these children. And so from the age of 13, we started the program in class. When children are 13, 14, 15, we identify these children. And then the last 2 years of high school, we actually sought 10% of these children that we believe exhibit exceptional affinity towards leadership, ethics, altruism, and a bias for action. And those children are then given a chance to show what they are made of for the next 2 years. And then finally, of those children, we select the best. And those children we commit to treat with the same advantages we had as children, in terms of finance, in terms of networks, connectivity, and so on. So from 70,000 children at 100 schools around India principally, we have now selected 70 children, 63 to be precise, and 8 more are being chosen right now. 63 children, and we have now supported them with scholarships to go to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, and so on, and the best schools in India, the IITs. There's a story in India which says, there's a saying, which says, if you can't get into IIT, go to MIT. So these are great universities, and to get these children into these places is something that we aspire to. And then to guide these children along the way, not just to give them a scholarship to university, but to get them together, to talk with them about what it means to be great leaders, to connect them to great leaders. We have an annual conference in India, an annual conference in the US, which we're going to have starting next year. And at the conference in India, we had 60 children, and we had 200 adults, political leaders, business leaders, academics, to talk about what leadership means and to explore with these young people the responsibilities and tasks of leadership. It's been a great joy, it's a great privilege, a great honor for me to do this work. I really see it as service. We have 8 of our young leaders here tonight who've come from Yale and so on. I hope they're sitting at all your different tables and you'll be able to talk to some of them. And if you could actually all stand up, then people can identify who you are. That would be great. And as we started this program, we said, why India? Why only India? Because this is about global leadership. We're focused, we tell these children that the world is the ambit of their leadership. We don't want them, people say, do you want them to come back to India? And I say, not necessarily. They can stay anywhere in the world as long as they're leading. And they're leading with ethics, integrity, altruism, and values. They can lead anywhere on the planet. It's their world. And so we've started the program now in 5 countries. We're in Gabon, we're in Bhutan, we're in Myanmar, we're in UAE, we started in Qatar, and we're starting in Saudi, we're starting in a number of other countries. And we're very excited about this evening because it's a milestone for us, because we're working with IEA, with Van, who's a dear friend for many years, and we have agreed to work together in partnership because Van is working in 48 countries around the world. And so we've decided to start working with them in countries around the world to identify exceptional leadership and to support and create a platform for that leadership to really take on the challenges that lie ahead for the planet. So with that, I'd like to invite Van to say a few words. Thank you all.
Well, I don't know if I should say thank you for following that act. I mean, how do you follow that act? My gosh. I'm not as exciting as that, and what we're doing is fairly, gosh, I feel like I'm not doing anything after hearing all that. Thank God he didn't play the video first. I shouldn't have even come up on the stage. But the International Economic Alliance started 10 years ago at Harvard University, basically built off of the Russian Investment Symposium. Russia came to Harvard back in '97, 5 years before I got there, when Valery was involved in it very early. And Harvard continued that. It was basically a summit of all the leaders from Russia coming to meet with their counterparts in America, and in a very informal setting, using the academic best practices and interactivity to kind of loosen everybody up, if you will. And what happened is a lot of countries came to us when we were inside of Harvard and said, why are you using all those Harvard resources to benefit just Russia? Why don't you benefit our country? Larry Summers and the leadership at Harvard thought that was a great idea. We had a bipartisan group, the Democrats from Harvard and a lot of the Republicans from the Bush administration, Secretary Baker and others that backed us. And now we have 48 country members, and what we do is we work with their heads of states and ministers to connect them with CEOs. Now, what's the connection to students? What we found when we were doing this is we had this great resource. All the Boston area schools. We had Harvard, we had MIT, which I would debate about IIT, but that's a separate argument, and Tufts and many others. And we thought, how can we harness the great energy of those students who come from around the world? What can we do? And so since we first started IEA, it's really been staffed very heavily by students. And some of them are here now. We have the Pickering Fellows, and since you did a stand-up, may I have our Pickering Fellows stand up wherever you are. Well, you were supposed to sit at different tables. You weren't supposed to all sit together. And thank you all for being here. And so that's kind of the starting point. We have the undergrads, we have grad students there at the Kennedy School, Harvard Business School students. And to that point, just setting up this video and setting up our speaker later is Gautam Mukunda. Gautam was actually one of the young students that was involved in IEA from the very beginning. And for us to see him go from MIT, where he maybe should have gone back to Harvard again, but he went to MIT. And the great professor at the business school, Clay Christensen, wisely grabbed him and brought him back over to the Harvard Business School. But having known Gautam from his early days and having worked with him at IEA, to see him now doing the great things he's doing on the topic of leadership, we thought it was very appropriate to have him talk about that a little bit later. So with no further ado, there's something following that I can certainly say nothing but, are we getting the video teed up? Okay. Everybody, you might want to dim the lights a little bit in case anybody gets tears in their eyes, because, you know, we got some macho guys in the room, might not want to show that. Hit the video.
At tGELF, we are committed to identifying, nurturing, and developing young leaders who have a global perspective and acceptance of diversity, a commitment to inclusiveness, and the desire to serve the community. Through our very own unique transformative leadership process, we instill fundamental values in young adults, empowering them to lead the change, to help shape a better world. tGELF, leading the change.
So it's a real pleasure and honor to be here speaking before such a distinguished, an extraordinarily distinguished company. I only hope that I can do the topic and the audience justice. Today would be a meaningful day for me, even if it weren't for this event. Those of you who are teachers know that there really is no joy quite like watching one of your students do well or and sort of demonstrate that they have accomplished something. So today for me was an extraordinarily meaningful day because my first PhD student ever is a active duty lieutenant colonel in the Army. And today he was promoted to full colonel. And it was remarkable. I'm enormously proud of him. He's one of these men who I say one of the most remarkable men. I told him the first day we met that I felt he was far more qualified to be the teacher than I was, and we could reverse roles any time that he felt it appropriate. But the reason I think of him today is because Everett, his name is Everett Spain, is sort of the perfect emblem of the systems to produce leaders that are one of the great assets that this country has. So Everett went to West Point, right? An institution designed to create not just leaders, but leaders in service of society, leaders in the service of the nation. He went from there, he served in the United States Army with distinction, winning every award and every sort of recognition there in the Army you can imagine. He went on from that, received an MBA from Duke. He was a White House fellow, and now he's doing his PhD at Harvard Business School in focusing on leadership. And the thing that all these institutions have in common, again, is that they are designed to train leaders, not just leaders in the service of themselves, not just leaders who are in the business of making a profit, but in leaders who are in the business of contributing entirely to society as a whole. And what makes them special is that whether we succeed or fail at this is certainly open to question. I occasionally tease our dean that the current motto of Harvard Business School is training leaders who make a difference in the world. And as I occasionally tease Nathan, the dean, there's a word missing from that motto. Ideally, we would like to train leaders who make a positive difference in the world. But at the moment, apparently, we're just settling for difference. And so I'm thinking about what it means. How is it that you make a positive difference in the world? Who are the people who do that? So let me tell you a story. And the story is one whose outlines I suspect you're all familiar with, but maybe the details will be new to you. And I find it engaging because many of you will have seen the movie Lincoln that just came out. So let me tell you, the story I'm going to tell you is, how did Abraham Lincoln become president of the United States? Now, when we look back at him, we think that this is a person of such towering achievement. Possibly certainly the greatest American leader who's ever lived. Of course he was president of the United States. At the moment of America's greatest crisis, that's who you want. You want the best, isn't it? That you want the best. So, going into the Republican Convention of 1860, in Chicago in 1860, there were lists published of the 10 leading candidates for the Republican nomination. And everybody knew that the Republican nominee was going to be the next president because the Democratic Party had split. So there was no real race here. The Republican nominee was going to win. And on these lists of 10 names, Abraham Lincoln usually didn't appear. In fact, Abraham Lincoln's national political career before he became president of the United States was one term in Congress, 2 years, at the end of which he was so unpopular that he did not even run for re-election. So, you think about this, right? So what happens here? Running against Abraham Lincoln in 1860, those of you who saw the movie recognize the character of William Henry Seward, who was Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State. Running against Abraham Lincoln was Seward. And Seward was the two-term governor of New York, at that time the richest, most powerful state in the Union, a two-term senator of New York, the founding father of the Republican Party, perhaps the foremost elected anti-slavery advocate in the nation, and a man of international reputation, someone known all around the world as perhaps America's most distinguished statesman. In 1860, as the nation is on the verge of civil war, at its moment of greatest crisis, surely the person you would choose is such a man, as distinguished and accomplished as any politician of his era. But instead we got Abraham Lincoln. How? And the way we got Abraham Lincoln is the convention of 1860 was in Chicago. Now some of you know that Lincoln was from Illinois, so Chicago is his home state. And the reason the convention is in Chicago, and the vote to put it in Chicago, by the way, was one vote. It was just by one vote, so it could have been somewhere else. The reason it's there is because no significant candidates were from Illinois, so it was neutral territory. And so Lincoln's team has one advantage, that it's their home turf. So they do a few things that we don't really think of as Lincolnian. For example, it's clear to say, by the way, in those days the candidates don't attend the convention. They're not allowed to. Only the campaign managers do. So Lincoln's not even part of any of this. He's sitting off at home listening on Telegram, getting reports on Telegram. And so Lincoln's team goes to Chicago and they print fake entrance tickets to the convention. And so they fill the convention with people, with Lincoln supporters who have been recruited from all across the Midwest. And what they've been recruited based on is how loud their voices are. So, every time Lincoln's name is mentioned on the floor of the convention, these Westerners start whooping and hooting and hollering so loudly that the windows of the hall start to shake. Okay? So this is an advantage. But here's where it really comes into play. Because Lincoln's campaign manager, he's never even been to a convention before. Never even attended one. Seward's campaign manager, the gloriously named Thurlow Weed, is the finest political operator of 19th century politics. Think of him like the Karl Rove of 1860, right? So this is not an even match, but right, he knows he's got the home field advantage. So he goes and, look around where you're sitting, look at the people next to you. This is possibly the only time in history when seating arrangements determine the fate of the world. Because Lincoln's campaign manager goes to the seating arrangements and he says, what I need you to do is put New York, Seward State, and I want it surrounded by other Seward states that are supporting Seward. So once the balloting happens and people are yelling and screaming and shouting, Weed is with the New York delegation and he suddenly finds out that he physically can't work his way through the other delegates to negotiate the deals that he needs to negotiate to get Seward the nomination. And this paralyzes the Seward campaign just for one afternoon. And in that afternoon, Lincoln's campaign manager goes to a man named Simon Cameron. Simon Cameron is the governor of Pennsylvania. He is a man of such legendary corruption that later he was a member of Lincoln's cabinet said that he was he would steal anything but a red-hot stove. When Cameron demanded an apology and Lincoln went to his and said, he's a fellow Republican, you really do have to apologize. The apology that was issued was, I'm sorry, Mr. Cameron, you would also steal the stove. So they go to Cameron, and so Lincoln telegraphs his campaign manager and says, make no deals that will bind me. Lincoln is an honest man. He's not going to make corrupt deals with men like Cameron. And Lincoln's campaign manager reads the telegram, stands in front of his team, tears it up, and says, Lincoln's not here. We got to do what we got to do. And he goes to Cameron, and he offers him a spot in Lincoln's cabinet if Cameron swings the state of Pennsylvania to Lincoln. And that's how Abraham Lincoln becomes president of the United States. So you ask, why do I tell this story? Right? This seems odd. What a story. The reason I think is this: when we think about this, here's the thing. Lincoln is a leader who made a difference. Right? It is almost impossible to overstate just how important Lincoln was in American history. Let me give you a sense of just how gifted he was. Doris Kearns Goodwin's recent book that won the Lincoln and the Pulitzer Prizes is subtitled The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. So he's a political genius. Stephen Peter Rosen, one of my colleagues at Harvard, who's one of the finest strategic analysts in the world, argues that Abraham Lincoln was the finest strategic thinker who has ever run a country. That without Abraham Lincoln, the North does not win the Civil War. John Steinbeck, who won a Nobel Prize in Literature and knew something about good prose, one would hope. John Steinbeck said that in his assessment, Abraham Lincoln was the finest writer the United States has ever produced. All of these qualities in one person at a moment of great crisis. So my work basically is about the question of when do you get leaders who make a difference? When do you get that sort of person, that transcendent individual who reshapes the course of history for better or for worse? We heard today, right, that Hitler and Stalin changed the world. Certainly not for the better, but they did change the world, almost, by ending the large parts of it. So, what does that tell us? What my work basically says, and you're all getting a copy of my book, so you can look at it. I hope you look at it in detail. But the very short version is this: the leaders who make a difference are the ones we don't know before we give them the job. Now, if you think about General Electric, all of you are familiar with General Electric. There probably isn't a person in the United States who does not have daily contact with products manufactured by General Electric. So when we teach our students about General Electric, we say GE is a company that works in practice, but not in theory. That everything we tell companies to do, GE doesn't do. But it works really well. What's the story there? The story seems to be that GE is uniquely good among companies at training leaders, at identifying them, maturing them, and selecting them for positions higher in the organization. So if you join GE, there's no such thing as a CEO of GE hired from outside. That doesn't exist. The only way you get that job is by working your way up the system over 20 years. So at the end of the day, let's say you've got hundreds of thousands of employees, and after 20 years, you've got 5 who are the candidates to be the next CEO of GE. What my research would tell you is you should believe 2 things about those 5 people. The first thing you should believe is that they're all really good at their job, because GE is good at picking leaders. How could you get to the top? How could you be a finalist if you weren't very good at your job when GE has had 20 years to study you and know how good you work? But the second thing you should believe about those 5 people is that it doesn't matter which one gets the job. And it doesn't matter because how different could they possibly be? They've all spent 20 years being evaluated by GE. So in GE, what you get consistently are leaders who are enormously capable, but who are also, in some sense, dispensable. If you replaced one with the other, the outcome for the organization is probably not all that different. Beg your pardon? Yeah, exactly, Moneyball. You could think of this, and exactly right. You could think of this as thinking about replacement leaders, right? Who is the person versus the replacement? So this is our theory, right? This is our idea. Someone like, think about Lincoln's career again. 2 years in Congress. The way he gets the nomination is by portraying himself as the least anti-slavery Republican. And then he becomes the president of the United States and leads the United States in the most terrible war in its history, one where the number of casualties was more than every other war in American history combined. But at the end of the day, he abolishes slavery. Right? He could tell the story of being the least anti-slavery Republican, but that's not what he really was. So the impact comes from the fact that the system did not know who it was getting before it got him, and he could do things that no one else could do. But you do not, in general, especially when you are talking about countries, want to take that kind of chance. The United States of America elected Abraham Lincoln in 1860. Think about who else it might have elected. Think about how else it might have been. When Adolf Hitler took power in Germany, he was not even a citizen of Germany until a couple of months before he became chancellor. He had not one day in politics before he became chancellor. If you look at how people chose him, what you see is that he had a tendency to wander around and give crazy speeches about all the awful things he would do if he ever got power. And what German leaders said was, there are lots of people wandering around giving crazy speeches. They're not serious. Once we give him power, we will control him and he will become a normal, rational grown-up. But of course, we all know that he wasn't. But how could they have known that? They had no information with which to judge him. They had never spent time in a room with him. They had never seen him with power. They could not know that he was serious. And so they made the wrong choice. The people who chose Abraham Lincoln did not know that he was not serious. That in fact he was much more committed to the anti-slavery cause than he pretended to be. And it is because they did not know that they made the right choice and saved the country. So this is the paradox of leadership, that the best and the worst leaders come from a similar process where we do not really know who they are before they get the job. But the way to resolve the paradox is the way that many of the world's finest companies and many of the world's most capable institutions have chosen to do so. They have said, we do not want to take this gamble. General Electric does not hire outside CEOs. McKinsey does not. Goldman Sachs does not. Johnson & Johnson, right? You think about these institutions, they do not. And the reason they do not is because they have cultivated the ability to train leaders. Not just leaders who are in it for themselves, but leaders who are hopefully dedicated to the institution as a whole. And it's why I find that this particular cause that tGELF and the IEA together are pursuing is particularly important and meaningful given the world that we have today. Because this is what we're saying to do, right? We have sometimes chosen leaders because we do not have alternatives. Because there are so relatively few people with the skills and the capabilities that we need, and there are so few whom we know enough about, whom we have properly studied, who have developed in all the ways that we need. And so if there is a thing that these institutions are contributing, it seems to me that it is enormously precious, right? This is the idea that we can create pools and systems and groups of people who are trained to be ethical leaders, who are trained to contribute to society beyond just themselves, who have the skill sets that go into leadership as well as the soul. And there's the skill and it's the combination of the two, the skill and the soul, that are so vital. Without one or the other, you cannot have success. And with skills without soul, you have only the worst of all failures. So when we look at these two institutions, why I'm so honored to be up here today is we're seeing one that is going to countries all around the world and helping to provide them with the sort of systems that produced people like my student, Everett. Right? Systems designed to create gifted, capable people who can take their country to the next level, not just because they are individual leaders, but because they are part of a group. Because they are part of an institution that can carry forward even when individuals stumble and fail. We can put our faith in systems as much as we can in people, because people change. But institutions are things that we, all of us, can build together, can construct, can strengthen, can reform, can improve, can transform if we need to, in ways that I think all of us know, and many people in this room have vastly more experience than I ever could in doing. And in creating these institutions and creating these ties between governments and companies, which the IEA is doing, giving leaders of these different institutions the chance to get into a room with one another, to shake each other's hands, to look each other into the eye and know what they are truly like. To give these countries the people who can be their next generation of transformative leaders, that I think is a cause that we can all support. And so, thank you very much for here today, and I hope that you will all join me in applauding our hosts, and our two hosts, I should say, for their remarkable work that they're doing for us.
I keep getting the tough act to follow here. For God's sakes, am I getting a raw end of the deal? We'll make sure to have everybody, there's enough books out there for everybody, and it is a very good read, and we're very proud of Gotham.
This is a great honor to be here and have a chance to share my story, my tGELF story with all of you. And you'll notice that I've been extremely fortunate, and I've had some incredibly supportive people throughout my life. And just when I was questioning whether I could do anything, tGELF stepped in and gave me 10,000 reasons to stay true to who I am. And they gave me the platform to meet so many amazing people and just exposed me to so many more ideas. And it helped me think about different ways that I could be of service to other people. And it definitely kept me motivated. tGELF made it possible for me to attend my dream school, at Yale. And I can't even begin to describe how amazing that was. I took some amazing classes with the best professors in the world. My friends are some of the most incredible people who are going to do amazing things. And what's amazing to me about this whole thing is that tGELF hasn't done this for just me. We're now a family of more than 60 scholars who are in amazing universities all over the world. And we're all in this together. And when I say the word family, I mean it in every sense of the word. One of my role models, Aung San Suu Kyi, was at Yale a couple of months ago and had the honor to hear her speak. And she said that there was a Burmese saying that said, you have to learn to suffer the hardships of not just bad fortune, but you also have to learn to suffer the hardships of good fortune. And she smiled and she said, do you know what that means? She said, that means that you must never be tempted away from the goal that you've set for yourself. You must never be shaken by external circumstances. You must never be tempted away from the path you've set for yourself by hopes of comfort, by hopes of getting ahead in life. And she said that it's extremely important for us to stay true to ourselves and never, ever compromise on our values. And that's something that I endeavor to do as I step out into the world. And I hope all of you do too. Thank you.
tGELF, leading the change.